Welcome to our live stream today. We've got a wonderful guest who's going to be helping us to look what it is like to be out of a high control organization that controlled so much of their lives. Well, as you can see from the screen, we're going to be talking to Beatrice. So let's bring Beatrice on and we'll get to know Beatrice a little bit. Good morning. No, it's afternoon where you are, isn't it, Beatrice?
It is afternoon, smack in the middle of the afternoon on a Sunday.
Smack in the middle. And how's your weekend been so far?
Yeah, it's been busy, but good stuff.
Oh, that's good. Well, it's great to have you on. I've been looking forward to our conversation just to find out a little bit about the Ultra Orthodox side of things. All I've really known before we started to chat about 6 weeks ago was they wore black hats, the men. The women seemed to have perfect hair, and the males had these sideburns that came down. And apart from that, I knew very little. So it's going to be really interesting to find out what it's like growing up in that organization and how life is now for you. So maybe by way of starting, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I grew up in the Ultra Orthodox community, and I guess I refer to it more of a community than an organization.
Okay.
It's not as organized as one might think, in terms of hierarchy. It's more like bundles of communities that are associated and connected in different ways. So,
Okay.
I grew up in the Ultra Orthodox community. I actually grew up in Canada, which has a smaller community. I grew up in Toronto. When I grew up, there were a couple of thousand. I think it's grown since then, since
Yeah.
the 70s and the 80s, but it's still fairly small compared to Brooklyn, where I live right now, where Brooklyn probably has one of the largest ultra Orthodox communities after Israel. I believe so. So right now,
Okay.
so where I am, it's huge, and you have a bunch of restaurants catered to the community and grocery stores and clothing stores. So there's a lot over here. So I'm a mother of 10 children. I got married
10.
at 18.
Yep.
Yes, 10. Yes. Yeah, it's fairly common to have large families. I'm not unusual in that way. I'm one of 8. My ex-husband is one of 9. Most of my siblings have 10 or close to 10 children. It's fairly common, and it's an expectation. There's an expectation to have large families. Yeah, and I was really very much part of the community. My ex-husband was a rabbi and a scholar, and I was till I was 40. When I was 40, I left the marriage. It was a very difficult marriage. I left the marriage, not realizing what I was going to get into after that would lead me to exploring, everything,
Yep.
and
Yep.
really being confronted with, is this the life I want to continue to live?
Wow. So let's go back through some of the things. So you said you grew up. What was your childhood like when you were part of the Ultra Orthodox?
It's so interesting because, I grew up in Canada, and we don't grow up in compounds or in anything like
Yep.
that. In a regular, nice house on a nice block, up and coming young block. But it was almost like we were living in our own world. Like, you did not play or talk or have any contact with anybody outside the community. So schools, from when I was 3, I went to a school that was an ultra Orthodox school, boys and girls separate from the time you're 3 years old. And if I went to the park right down the block.
Yeah.
If another kid would come talk to you, you just would run away. Like, you would know that you were different, you were separate. My first language was Yiddish, so I only started speaking English in the school I went to. They spoke English, so I only started speaking English once I went to school. But I was raised with Yiddish, which is commonly used in the community.
Okay.
Yeah, so there was that extreme separation. My mother worked in the community, in the school system. My father worked for somebody from the community as well. It's common. You don't have to, but it's very common and accepted to work within the community as well. There, he had some contact with people outside the community, but they would never become our friends. We would never invite them. We would
Yeah.
never eat with them or anything like that. So I think that I would say was the most significant, like that separation. Also, strong modesty rules from a very young age. Some people actually do this to 3-year-olds. I started when I was 9, that we couldn't wear knee socks. We had to wear stockings that went all the way up our legs, skirts, only skirts that covered our knees
From 3 years old.
from 3. Yeah, skirts
Wow.
covered our knees. Sleeves had to cover your elbows. Um, necklines, specific bones that need to be covered. The men were a little, well, they wore pants, obviously, but also it was a little looser. Like they were allowed to wear short sleeves, but when they got older, they didn't really wear short sleeves, or they would wear short pants maybe until they were 9, and then they'd wear longer
Hmm.
pants. But also a pretty conservative dress code. But a lot of the emphasis on the extensive rules was around the women, which colors they could wear. You couldn't wear red because red was too showy and attractive. And
Oh, okay.
I love wearing red now, but I couldn't wear red, and even bright yellow was controversial, because it was too showy. So there was a lot of that from a very young age, emphasis on modesty. Yeah.
Goodness me.
Yeah.
Now, I was doing a little bit of research. What's the story with the hair?
So there are some rules, like while you're a girl, like your hair shouldn't be too long, it should
Yep.
be more modest, but basically have your regular hair until you get married. And once you get married, a woman, so it's different, very different for men and women. So once you get married, a woman needs to cover her hair fully. So the community I grew up in, they wore wigs. So talk about the perfectly made hair is often a
Yeah.
wig. So some are better. Some communities wear different wigs. So some communities will wear wigs that are made of very natural hair that are very expensive. Those look beautiful. Some communities will only wear shorter wigs that have a lot of synthetic hair in them, so that they actually look pretty much like a wig. I guess I was somewhere in between those two, where my wigs looked okay, but they were
Okay.
synthetic
Yep.
ish. Yeah, we had another layer. There are some subcultures within the ultra Orthodox Jewish community that expect the women to actually shave their hair. So I
Oh,
shaved my
really?
hair for 20 years. Yeah, for 20 years there was, yeah, yeah, it was
What's the
monthly.
reason behind the cutting of the hair, the shaving of the hair?
Very recent. That's actually, it's interesting because I was just talking to somebody about it. There's kind of this sense that, Orthodox Judaism or ultra Orthodox Judaism was the original, like they're the originals, right? But actually, a lot of the traditions that are done today are really pretty recent, and including shaving your hair. It started in Eastern Europe at some point.
Oh, okay.
And no one knows exactly what the origin is. It's a combination of a woman's hair should never be seen. So there are stories going way back of women who were so, made sure the walls of their house never saw their hair, and as a result, they were blessed with XYZ. So there's kind of traditions around that. There's also, a monthly requirement of a woman to go to a ritual bath. And that happens after she gets her period. She purifies herself
Yep.
for 7 days and then goes to this ritual bath. Part of the rules of the ritual bath is that your hair can't have any knots in it, because if it does, the hair is not reaching every little part of your hair. So that would be another reason why a woman would keep her hair short, so that she
Oh,
should make
okay.
sure. But it's not accepted everywhere. In many communities, the women wear shorter hair or regular hair. But I did shave my hair for 20 years. And there are communities where women won't wear wigs also, where women will just wear kerchiefs, or they'll wear kerchiefs like 2 layers. So they'll wear like a little wig and then a kerchief on top. So there's all different kinds. And like in any culture, there's like subcultures and subcultures, so and it's only if you're in it that you really get it, but to
Yeah.
an outsider it would look more similar than not. But there are different nuances, even like the men. So the thing with the men is
Yeah.
this is a biblical thing, not to shave off your sides
Yep.
of your hair.
Sideburns. Yep.
Yeah, so that's a biblical thing. So biblically there's a certain like measurement up to which they're allowed to cut their hair, and that part is not allowed to be cut shorter than that. It evolved into these longer side curls, but that's not the original biblical thing. So in some cultures, you'll see they have a little side curls behind their ears. Some of them you'll see the long sideburns, which has become almost the stereotypical ultra
Yep.
orthodox, but not
Yep.
everybody does. And some of them will just have sideburns and won't actually grow out longer hair.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know how the short hair happened. I mean, I guess, they're wearing the head covering, the kippah, the yarmulke. So I guess, I don't know, it just became accepted to have that short hair,
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So if a male was to cut, or a female was to cut the hair differently than what is expected in a community, any repercussions?
So it's like breaking the rules, right?
Yeah.
And that depends. There's a wide spectrum, right? So there's, a community, a Satmar community that's part of the ultra Orthodox world. They have a town in upstate New York, which houses, I'm not sure what the numbers are now, but tens of thousands of people. So it's a fairly large village, which they pretty much control in terms of, politically and practically. And
Okay.
in that community, the expectation is that women shave their hair. If you don't shave your hair, there's a woman that wrote about it, about her not shaving her hair. And they found out, they suspected it. And then they found out because when she went to the ritual bath, they saw that her hair was long. That got phone calls from, the organization that upholds the modesty rules. And, she was told that if she doesn't conform, she'll have to leave the community. Her child won't be accepted into the school, things like that.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
I've been called down to the school in the past when I was wearing a wig with a complaint that my wig was too long. Okay. And that if I don't conform, my child won't be able to go to the school. So, because it's loosely organized, it's not like that. No one can kick you out of the community. Where are they going to kick you out of? They can make your life very difficult. And one
Okay.
of the main tools that are used are the schools. For instance, the schools will, they send you a booklet of like 10 pages of all the rules. And these rules some of them impact your child in school, but most of them don't. And they can range from the mothers aren't allowed to drive. In some communities, the mothers can't drive, right? The length the length of your wigs, and the modesty rules can go on and on. Electronic devices. If you want your child to go to the school, they have to have a filter on all. You have to
Right.
have a filter on
Yep.
all your electronic devices, and that's how they control the internet. It's interesting. I was just reading an article in Israel. It's actually like legislated, which is crazy, that kosher phones, they call them, which are cell phones that can't access the internet or very limited internet, receive special phone numbers, and those they actually block them from reaching. It's crazy. Here in the United States, we don't have that, but they do demand that people put filters on their internet, which really limits their exposure because they don't want them to go finding out about other things. So the schools are big tools to control.
Okay.
Also, there's like social ostracization. It's not organized. That's why I said I call it a community instead of
Yeah,
an
I can
organization,
understand that. Yeah.
because it's not like there's, I don't know how it works in JW, but in Catholicism, right, there's the Pope, and then there's the next layer and the next layer. It's not like that. You have a few grand rabbis of like different sects and different communities, and they do things differently, and oftentimes they actually hate each other, and they're not, but then on certain things they get together and like proclaim these big announcements. They've been
Yep.
very serious feuds between the different sects and things like that. So it's interesting, but yet I think because of the isolation that you're raised with, there's also, and this is, I think, very much Holocaust stuff,
Yeah.
where most of the ultra Orthodox community, I think in the world, would be fair to say, are survivors or grandchildren of survivors. like me, all my grandparents were Holocaust survivors. And my mother said she went to school and like one kid had a grandmother and one kid had a grandfather. Like it was built after the Holocaust. This ultra Orthodox community as we know it in America and in Israel and even in Europe, England, Australia, New Zealand, all these they were just I don't know how many Jews there are in New Zealand, but in Australia also I know I have relatives there. So a lot of the fear of outsiders is very visceral. It's not just like a rule. It's
Okay.
something they feel in their bones. They're terrified of outsiders, in a way that of unprocessed trauma.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Understand that feeling. we like the J Dubs, if they were to leave, basically they've lost their family. Is that the same for you guys?
So again, similarly in that it's a community not an organization, there's no rule. There's no
No
rule
rule.
that says,
Okay.
if your child leaves, your family member leaves, you're not allowed to talk to them. But socially, it's like accepted that you'll cut them off. Now, do some people still manage to figure out how to have some sort of relationship?
Yep.
It's just complicated because oftentimes
Mm.
the expectation is, okay, so if you go to visit your family who lives in the ultra Orthodox community, you're expected to dress like them, right? Or you
Okay.
expect
Yep.
to be modest, right? So it's like, it has its conditions, but some people, figure out how to navigate that. In my case, and in many other people's that I know, that's not, it didn't happen like that. I have 10 children, 3 of them live with me, 7 of them don't have contact with me. And yeah, it's painful. Like it's what I have seen, and I wonder, if you've seen the same, like religion trumps human emotions, human feelings, human connections.
Yeah.
Sad. Yeah.
It is sad.
Yeah.
J Dubs, when you talk about the shunning side of things, um, in recent times they've got more propaganda out there going, you don't need to make up stories to be close to your
Mm,
family. Where's your loyalty to Jehovah God? Um, so while there's nothing really in the Bible that says that, they have a rule.
yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
So let me ask you: you got married. You've obviously left. So you said you've got 10 children. Any ramifications for your children and yourself now that you're no longer with your husband, who's a rabbi and what's the other one? Not a researcher, a
Scholar.
yeah. Is there any ramifications on that side of things?
Yeah. So one of the big things in the way the community is set up is there are arranged marriages
Arranged marriages.
with matchmakers.
Do
Okay.
they work?
I mean, they get married, and it's hard to leave, so people stay.
Oh, okay.
Well,
Yep.
it's
Yep.
becoming more common for young people to get divorced, and sometimes rabbis are okay with it now. There's no rule that you're not allowed to get divorced. Again, there's no rule, but it's so socially unaccepted, and especially if you get married at 18 and you're groomed for it. And like for instance,
You
in my
are.
case, I didn't graduate high school. I went to 2 years of high school and then went to religious seminary after that. So by the time I was 18 and ready to get married, I didn't have a high school diploma. I didn't there was no focus on, any financial independence, career or anything. What was common, at least back then, was,
Yep.
girls would teach in the schools where they would receive like minimum wage or even less, and the expectation was once you got married, once you had a few kids, you'd stay at home. Now, are there exceptions? Yes, there are exceptions. There always are. Are there people who come into the Orthodox community with their education and, continue their careers? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
There are even, believe it or not, some sects within the ultra Orthodox community where women are encouraged to have a career so that they can support their husbands in continuing to be scholars. So that's one twist on it.
Oh,
But ultimately, there's no At 18, you're being set up to get married. At 20, if you're not married, something's wrong. Like what's wrong? So we were very much on the um it's not a caste system, but it is kind of, so we were kind of up there, right? In terms of we were getting phone calls from, rabbis' children or wealthy people, people of prestige in the community were being suggested to our children, right? Back then, before I left. Um, that's not happening anymore.
Oh, okay.
I have children in their 20s that are unmarried right now, which
Yep,
is,
yep.
which, you know, yeah, which uh, I'm pretty public about my beliefs.
Yep.
I've filed a lawsuit against my son's school, which nobody wants to hear about, which we can talk about in more detail if you like. Nobody wants, it's not considered a positive thing in the community if you have a parent
Yeah.
speaking up. You know,
Wow. So just go back a step. You're groomed to 18 or 20 to be married.
yeah.
Did you receive any other education that a woman in the Ultra Orthodox
Yeah.
gets, the education side of things, or
So interestingly enough, the girls do get more of an education than the boys.
they
So
do?
yeah, they do. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
different.
Yeah, yeah, they do. Boys, because in theory, boys are supposed to become scholars. Boys are supposed to spend every moment of their day studying, right? And that's kind of a biblical thing, right? Every moment that they have free, they're supposed to spend studying. Girls don't have that obligation. Girls are supposed to be the helpers, right? So they need to know how to fill out the checkbook, how to write out the check, how to go to the store, how to, fill out the form in the doctor's office. So yes, there's quite a big discrepancy, especially, in the ultra Orthodox, in the Hasidic part of ultra Orthodoxy, where boys can often be graduating with almost illiterate, with a third grade, which would be like an 8-year-old, 9-year-old level in math and reading, while girls will be a little better. They'll definitely be a little better. Where I went to school in Canada, we learned Shakespeare. You know, my
Okay, that's a
girls,
bit different.
my girls didn't. Like my girls went to schools that would not touch those books.
Is that because it's a different sort of controlling influence in the community, or?
I think it became more extreme over time. You know,
Oh, okay.
there are still some ultra orthodox schools that provide a strong education. There's what's called the modern Orthodox, so it wouldn't be called ultra Orthodox. It would be the modern Orthodox. They provide very, very, very strong education, and they're actually one of the most affluent religious demographic in the United States. I just heard they put a very strong emphasis on both secular and religious studies, and they have their kids going to Ivy League schools and things like that. But that's not the ultra Orthodox community. The ultra Orthodox community, the girls are getting by, the boys are getting nothing. It's common, especially again in the Hasidic part of the ultra Orthodox Jewish world, where I live now in Brooklyn, where they're functionally illiterate. Very limited, very limited knowledge of the language. And some of them are successful. They hustle and they become entrepreneurs and they start their own
Yep.
businesses. But yet you want to read an email and you're like, what is he trying to say? I can't read that. So people are pretty amazing. People, despite difficult circumstances, could sometimes, push through. But at the same time, there are very high rates of poverty.
Wow.
Especially, considering very large families, people struggle a lot. Charity is a very big value in the community, very much inside, right? So it's a very strong value to give your money to insiders. But if you're poor, if you're a rabbi, you'll be fine because people will be helping you. Before the holidays, you'll be getting discount. I mean, I remember we used to get discounts to all the clothing stores and the shoe stores and vouchers for the groceries. So we'd be, and the wealthy people in the community, would basically only give charity to people in the community. So that's how kind of they keep each other afloat. Very strong values in keeping each other afloat, as long as you conform and
Yeah.
do what you're supposed to.
Yep.
It's not free, not free, but it is a high cost. But that's the fact. They do that. They do that. Yeah. So I mean, but from a very young age, you're going to get married at 18. There's no question, right? There's no question. Socially, and you see all that around you, and weddings are a very big deal, and there are weddings every night, and it's kind of a really big part of your life. I remember
Okay.
when I was 12, I cooked a dish, right, like a special dish for Friday night, right, for Shabbos, right, the Sabbath. We have Friday night, and the
Yep.
Saturday day. There are these very big festive meals. Cook the dish. And I remember bringing it to the table and my father announcing, "Oh, I'm going to call the matchmaker, the shadchan. It's called the shadchan, and tell them what a good dish you cook." He was probably joking, but that was the thing. You're a
Yeah.
girl, you're learning how to cook well, how to take care of children, because you're taking care of all of your younger siblings, right? Because I was 12 and I had seven younger sisters and brothers. So you quickly learn part of your job is to take care of them. So that when you get married, you're equipped. You can do it. Yeah.
The training from childhood.
And like like I look at one of my sisters that fought back a little bit with the arranged marriage thing. So she didn't want to marry the people my parents suggested. Okay, she wanted someone that would go to work, that wouldn't study later. So she had her mind. She had a little bit of a mind, but oh my gosh, she had to fight. She had to fight for it. In the end, she married. In the end, my parents found her somebody that was compatible to what she wanted. But it's hard. Like people say, oh, the marriages aren't really forced. You actually do have a choice, but you don't really have a choice. You're 18. They tell
Mm,
you, I mean, unless it's really hard to speak up. It's really, really, you have to fight. And you're not just, they would take you, like, if let's say you would say no to your parents, they would take you to a rabbi who would force you. They would take you to the next person to force you. And then,
really?
like, what are you supposed to do?
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes I think back, my marriage was tough from the beginning. Like, why didn't I speak up earlier? Why didn't I say anything? It's like, what was I supposed to do? Where was I supposed to go? This was like such an exciting match. People, like, there's a lot of focus put on, I don't know if that's in JW, a lot of focus put on your I know the Yiddish word, the yichus, which is like your lineage. A lot of
Yep.
focus on your lineage. If you have rabbis in your lineage, or things like that, then it's like that gives you a ton of status. So it was like the rabbis in my family and in his family. It was like whoa, this is going to be an awesome match. And what was I going to do? Me, young 18-year-old, no idea. Like, and in retrospect, honestly, if I would have left when I was 18, I think it would have been really, really rough. I would have had, no tools emotionally, practically, financially. I don't know. When I left at 40, I was halfway through an MBA. I already had a job. I had a job already. I was the director of a nonprofit in the community, but still, like, there was a paycheck coming in. I knew there was a future, maybe, and it was so hard. But imagine at like 18, I mean, people do it.
Yeah.
A lot of people struggle a lot, and I don't know if it's like that it probably is like that in other places. It's really hard. It's like, then you have to try to figure out how to acclimate in the world, how to act like a normal person in the world.
Yep.
Sometimes I still don't know. Sometimes I still feel like I'm doing everything wrong. That, like, I just don't know the social cues, the expectations. Like, it's like a foreign, I still, like, you see me walking down the street in Brooklyn, I just look like a regular person, right? Like,
Yep.
you wouldn't, you wouldn't stop. You wouldn't stop and think anything. But I feel like I'm an outsider. You know, I'm like thinking like, oh, they're looking at me different. They're not. It's just me.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what was it like being married? You said it was quite difficult. What
I
were some
yeah.
of the things that you found really struggling to cope or handle?
So, I mean, people have difficult marriages in all communities. So let me start with that. I think the added layers were here are some of the added layers. You're taught from a very young age a few
Yeah.
things. First of all, there's an adage, it's probably from the Talmud, that says, this is awful, that says a kosher woman, like a valid woman, does the will of her husband no matter what.
Hmm.
So you're taught that from I don't know when. I mean, I probably wasn't young when I was taught that, but you were told that. I remember I used to pray to be worthy of being that good wife. So number one. Another thing you're taught is that your road to the world to come, your way to get to the world to come, Okay. So yes, Jewish people talk in the ultra Orthodox community and Orthodox community, they talk about heaven and hell. Yes. It's a little different maybe than in Christianity, but there's kind of a myth that Jewish people don't have that, but I don't know. We heard about that. It wasn't emphasized, definitely not. And fear was
Okay.
more about, it was a little different, but it's still, and men get their reward by how much of the Torah, right? The Bible, the Old Testament they learn. But how do women get it? Right? This is, I think, a Talmud thing. By supporting their husbands in learning and making sure that their sons go to study.
Yeah.
So here I was married to somebody that was a scholar that put his scholarly pursuits above everything, including family, me, everything. I couldn't complain, right? Because this was my route to the world to come.
Yeah.
Right? He was my he was my right to there, right? How can I complain? How can I say anything bad? And when he be unavailable for me, or you know be rough with me or things like that, I would always go back to, but like, I need to be good. I need to be that good wife. This is my way. And I remember this was a couple of years before I left, took some therapy, you know, and I remember when all of a sudden it hit me, like, he's just really not a nice husband. Like, this has like,
Yeah.
in my mind, I was so brainwashed, and I would get a lot of praise for being this good wife. I would get a lot of praise for him being this big scholar, right? And then I remember when it hit me, like, he's just really not a great husband or father, you know. Like, this has nothing to do with his scholarliness or godliness or holiness. Like, it just is what it is. And that kind of, once I broke away from that, that really helped me start to see things in terms of like where I was in this marriage, what was working, and then ultimately
Yep.
left marriage, and then ultimately left, I guess, the belief system. You know.
So when you left, what's the story with regards to the children? Like, I
So
know a lot of J-dubs, they struggle. It's nowhere near as high controlled as, from what I understand, but you can clarify that with the ultra orthodox. But they struggle in the court system.
yeah,
What's the story on, say, the ultra orthodox side of things?
here it's very complicated. So I was actually part of the community when I left my marriage, but I was very
Oh,
scared of
okay.
losing my children. Yeah, I was very much still part of the community. I was very scared of leaving my children because there were things in the news where I heard of mothers who had left their marriages and lost their children. So I was very scared. I ultimately, I mean, and I don't recommend this to anybody to do this, but what I did was he was threatening me that if I leave him, I'll lose the children. So I ended up leaving the house in the middle of the night with my four younger ones. My older ones at that point were not going to come with me. I had a fifth one that I was hoping would come, but he didn't. So I took the four younger ones with me. I hustled like crazy to raise, I mean, in retrospect, here I was. I left the house. It took me a month till I found an apartment. So I was staying with different friends back and forth.
Yeah.
I raised like $20,000 in those first few days to be able to pay for an attorney. Most of it was money that I borrowed that I eventually paid back, but I had the money. Like, an attorney's not going to represent you, and you need good attorneys, like, because they're hiring good attorneys, right? So I would say that that's what saved me. Eventually, one of my four children went back to his father. So I actually never, well, I shouldn't say that, but because I did lose custody for about a week back in
Oh,
April.
okay. Yeah.
But for the most part, I did well in the court system. And that was because I had a very strong attorney. How I'll say this with the disclaimer that the courts, especially in New York State, where there's a strong voting bloc, meaning the judges, family court judges, are voted in, at least in the county where my court case is, and there's a strong allegiance to the people that voted for them, and
Okay.
they vote in the block. They vote in the block for the mayor. They vote in the block for everybody. The rabbis say who to vote for, and they vote for them. So um, it's really hard. It's really hard. There's also been a lot of cases in the court system before me where lawyers have tried to show that it's important that the kids stay with the religious parent who keeps them in the religious school because that's what they call the status quo. That's what the kid is familiar with. Completely disregarding the fact that the schools are not providing an education and that children are a lot more adjustable than you think. Like children, they're fine. Like if they're fine. Like so it can be really tough and people have lost custody. I had trouble when I dropped my good lawyer and started working with a pro bono lawyer that a organization had recommended to me, who was not up to par and was not as sharp. But I
Okay.
will say it cost a lot of money. At one point, I had a fundraiser done for me, and we raised $30,000, which is amazing, and it lasted 2 months. So it's the family court system in the United States is bad, is really bad in general, and when it
Mm,
comes to these issues, is even worse. I mean, I hope there'll be general reform, but there definitely needs to be reform done in this. It doesn't make sense. We live in the United States. We don't live in a religious country. Why should somebody, a parent, be afraid that if they leave the community, they'll lose their children through the court
exactly.
system? Like I lost my older children not through the court system. It was because they were so angry at me. They did not want to be with me, right? That's painful. That's painful enough. But when you have a judge making those rules, when you have a judge taking away custody from parents because of religious things, I mean, I can't talk too much about this, even though I want to, because I do have a gag order about talking about the specifics about my court case. So I look forward to when my court case is over and then I can talk more freely because it is mind blowing. It is mind blowing. But that is a huge fear that people have and sometimes keeps people in the community because they're
Yeah.
so afraid, which is like, it's awful. And I hope changes will be made. I'm working with an organization and with different politicians to see if there could be some legislation, at least around the education issue, because what happens is people leave the community and they want to send their children to normal schools so that they should get a normal education, and they're blocked from doing that. Through the courts block them from doing that. So
And is that all because they got voted in by the rabbis or the
for the
ones that
most
the
part,
rabbis had
for the most
suggested?
part, and also what happens is that if you're the community, again, as I said, they fundraise a lot internally, so they'll be able to hire the best lawyers, and similar to in cases of domestic violence, that often, the woman who's been a victim of domestic violence won't have the resources, so she'll end up losing custody where to an abusive father because she doesn't have the resources. Very similar dynamic here, where a person leaves the community, and those first few years, they're at such a loss, right? They don't have a job. They're just going, maybe even going to college as an adult, right? Trying to build themselves up outside the community. They don't have the resources, but yet, the husband, who may have been abusive, or maybe not, has all the resources in the world. And I mean, there was one campaign that was done publicly where the community raised $1 million for this person, for this father to go to court, to continue his court fight. Um, it's incredibly unfair, incredibly scary, and I'm hopeful it will change. I mean, there
Mm,
definitely has been more talk in the media about the community,
yeah.
and it's very touchy. You know, I'm involved in the education issue. As I mentioned, I filed a lawsuit against my son's school because, according, I live in New York State, right? Children, there's mandatory education rules, but yet there are these schools where tens of thousands of kids go to, including my son, that don't provide an education. So, we're going through the court system, and he'll probably graduate way before anything is resolved. But we're still doing all that. Um, I lost my train of thought there. Um, Completely lost my train of thought.
So just going back to the lawsuit, like the J-Dubs are encouraged not to take their brother to court.
Oh yeah.
What would that be like in the the community?
So there's a word used called meisser, Moser, or Moiser, right? Meisser. And a meisser is somebody who tattletales,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Tattletale. That's the worst thing. And back in Eastern Europe, if you were a meisser in one of your villages, like
Yeah.
you were allowed to be killed because you were considered somebody that's out to hurt other people and bring them so much harm that you were allowed to be killed. Okay?
Just because you told
Because you're
something.
tattletaling, yeah. No, not because you're going to court, right? Because you're going to
No,
the
no, but yeah, the leading up to it.
because you're willing to go to outside authorities, to non-Jewish authorities to tell on the community. So here's how it impacts people: sexual abuse. You,
Yes.
according to the rabbis, all ultra Orthodox rabbis, even modern Orthodox a little bit, if you want to go to file in court because of sexual abuse, you have to first check in with a rabbi. They're gatekeepers to that.
Okay.
They make it difficult. That's what they say. Now, are there some people now already who are going against the rules? Yeah, there are. But you're considered a bad person. Hopefully that changes. But for now, that's the rule. Going to court. The first time when I went to court, that was considered, my parents did everything to try to stop me from going to court. All I did was get custody and, order of protection so my children shouldn't be taken away from me. But that was considered a bad thing. And definitely telling the government or the court that my son's school is not giving him an education is considered a really bad thing. Yeah, my son has been told by kids in this class, "Oh, your mother is a meisser. She tells the government where the school is." You know,
Oh, okay.
so he's
All right.
he's been told that. So I encourage him, to tell them this is nothing to do with me, and all of that. But yeah, definitely, definitely, and again, there's such a fear of going to the outside authorities
Yep.
that for me part of it was, and it was interesting because when I first left, I left in the middle of the night, went to my brother it was a holiday, Passover, went to my brother for 2 days, and then didn't know what to do, and I called up a rabbi and I said, what do I do now? And he's like, are you scared? I'm like, I'm absolutely terrified. And he's like, well, he's like, I don't know. He's like, you know what? If you're really scared, you're allowed to go to court. That's what I tell people. If they're really scared, they're allowed to go to court. So I went to court. If he wouldn't have said that to me, I don't know if I would have even gone when I really needed to, because how I was brainwashed all my years, how that's the worst thing.
Yep.
And any issues that we have to resolve internally. But what if the issues are systemic? And what if the issues are encouraged by the community? You're going in circles, So that's
Yeah.
why,
Yeah.
you know, it's no system. Every system needs the ability to go outside of it. Even good systems always need,
Yep.
somewhere that you can go outside, but they don't want that. They want you to stay stuck. They want it to stay closed. Yeah.
So obviously you're talking about the younger ones of your children. So is that the four youngest ones?
Yes, but one of them
Okay.
went back. One
All
of them
right.
went back. Yeah. So now there's three. The second one that was with me went back. You know, I'm still hopeful. I'm not giving up
Mm,
hope. I don't know. It's hard. It's hard for them, but things might change. Because
yep.
again,
You never
it's
know.
not like JW that that if they have contact with me, they'll be excommunicated. Like there are ways that they'd be able to see me if they wanted to. So I'm always hopeful, you
Yeah.
know.
Well, there are ways J-Dubs can do it. Um, it's like what you said before. You've got different sort of hierarchical things. Excuse me. Where some are very, very strong
Mm,
and ultra J-Dubs, where
yeah.
then you've got ones down the bottom that just go because that's what they used to.
Right.
But there are ways, because in their publications for the J-Dubs, um, you can't talk about their beliefs, but on family emergencies,
Mm,
they are allowed to. It all depends on their view on it.
mm,
So there are ways around it, and you won't technically get disfellowshipped, excommunicated, but you're looked down upon.
yeah. Yeah.
So it becomes very hard.
Yeah. And when
So
your
yeah,
whole like standing in the community is your social standing and there's nothing
yeah,
else, it's really hard. I think people underestimate, one of the themes that happens in New York, for instance, around the education thing is you have politicians and other people saying, okay, you don't like the school, send your kid to another school. What's the big deal? Right? Right. That sounds logical, right?
yep, yep.
Right. But people don't you can't.
Mhm.
It's social suicide. Like you just can't do it. Even to a let's say an Orthodox school or even an ultra Orthodox school that is a little more liberal, that provides a little more education for the boys. The social ramifications of doing something like that are so big that you just don't do it. Now, are there people who do? Yes, but then they're considered, it's so weird, like in the community. If the minute you speak up against issues, you're considered you're not part of the community anymore. So you can't be part of the community and speak up. So it's like an impossible situation, you know. Um, let's see. I mean, I wonder what will happen. The internet has done a lot, has impacted the community a lot. As much as they try to shut it down, and deny people access, people still have access to it. I was
Yeah,
just mentioning in Israel, there was a whole political storm about it last week. And, one of the ministers in the government had all the rabbis came to him and begged him to still keep control over those phone numbers, right? That are belong to the ultra Orthodox community, that they shouldn't be able to call. And
yep.
he's like, do you know that 50% of your people have the internet? Like, do you know that? Because they know that because they have access to all of it, right? Like, are you, like, what are you doing? You're pretending. So, and
Yeah,
it's interesting because they portray it that the reason why they don't want people to have access because of like all immodest things. That's the word they use. It's full of immodest and terrible things. But you know what? It's not about that. There's information out there. There's information. All of a sudden, I know for myself, before I left my marriage, I had access to the internet because I was going to college. For the most part, I had a filter, but like toward the end, I didn't have the filter anymore. Of course, I Googled, like, how does a woman leave a marriage? Like, what is of course I was Googling those things. Of course, you automatically there are Facebook groups for people who are in the closet, they call them, right? That's the term they use, apologies, to where it came from originally, the LGBTQ community, but in the ultra Orthodox community, they call themselves in the closet, right? So,
yep.
OTD, which stands for off the derech, off the path. Okay. So they're going on their own beaten path in the closet. So there are people gathering together, whether in person or online, which sometimes feels safer to people because they could stay
Yeah,
anonymous.
they can.
Something that was impossible even 10, 15 years ago. If you felt completely alone, and that's people aren't alone as much. The world is a lot more connected now. And yet some of my children, right, the ones that are not with me, they will not touch a smartphone, not literally not touch it. They will have those flip phones, those old black phones
Yep.
that won't have texting capacity because they want to stay away. Now, will their wives have a smartphone with some internet? Probably. But so there's different ways that they're handling it. But my son's like, he brought home a note from school because it's Hanukkah now. So the note was rules about presents that you're allowed to give.
Yeah.
So, right? So it's not allowed to have anything with a touch screen or somewhere that you can put an SD card in. Those were their two rules. Obviously no internet, but also like those two things. No SD card and no touch screen. And my son just like burst, he was literally laughing. He's like, every single bus driver in my school has a phone. Like they're gonna have to fire everybody. Everybody has access to the internet. So it's making people doubt the rabbis more. It's making people question things. But I think it will probably have some people leaving and some people hunkering down even more. You know, people, it's crazy, right? I don't know. Do you have people joining JWs? Is that a thing that people join?
It's certainly slowed down
Okay.
because they now do mostly, they don't, at the moment, they're not knocking on doors. They aren't standing on the corner with their carts. What they
Okay.
are doing is making phone calls and writing letters.
Mm,
And they're spending thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of hours. In recent times, I've only heard of one, and that was
mm,
somewhere in the States that decided they wanted to join. Now,
yeah.
I'm sure there may be others, but there's more leaving than
Right.
going in.
Right. Right.
So it's, yeah, they've got very similar ideas with regards to the internet. They won't stop you from having internet, but they encourage every JW just to go to their own official website,
Mm, okay.
because that's where they're producing all their videos, all their publications,
Yeah.
all their broadcast. Um, but the best thing they did was put everything online,
Right.
because they don't supply filters like the Orthodox,
No.
the Ultra Orthodox.
Yeah.
And so they are going around and they will stumble on something about J-dubs, which is usually, here's the facts about the J-dubs.
Yeah.
And then they go, no, 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 no. Oh, okay, it is. And it starts waking them up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So very similar. I saw it, but was it 2012 that they had a big meeting?
Yeah. They
And
tried. That
they,
was still when they thought that, see, it's like stages. That was still when they thought that they could completely stop the internet, right? That they could completely stop it,
yep.
right? That they could, right? You saw that, right? That person like yelling away.
Yeah, he
Um,
was going like this. He's
yeah,
stabbing his head, and your brothers and sisters, and that.
yeah.
To me, looking out the outside was quite hilarious, because what did they think they were going to achieve?
Yeah, but they thought that they could rouse up the people enough that they can keep the internet out of the community. Yeah,
Okay.
that was their goal. That was their goal. Then they realized they can't. So
Yep.
that's how they started with the filters. But even with the filters, you know how many people have two phones? They have one phone that they put a filter on and they give the number to the school. Then they have a second phone they keep in their back pocket, because if you live in the world today, you're going shopping. Even if you're a mother, you're going shopping, you're doing the basics. But yet
Yep.
there are people that will shop on Amazon for you, you know, right?
Okay. Yep.
There are people that will call the Uber for you for the people that don't have smartphones. Their business is set up to support people who don't have the internet. But it's still infiltrated a lot. Like, and then it's making a big difference. Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah.
yep. You just got to smile at it. So you've been out for how long now?
So here was my journey. So in 2015, 16, for about 6 months, I was doing a double life thing
Okay. Yep.
where, you know, again, with Orthodox Judaism, a lot of it is how you look on the outside, right? So, you know, during the week I was regular, my short wig and my long skirt, you know, and then on the weekends I'd go into the city, take off the wig. My hair was already growing, and then, you know, do whatever for the weekend, and then come back. Um, that I was doing that for about 6 months, and I was very scared. I was very scared to publicly
Mm,
be not, because of my children, you know. So I did that for about 6 months, and it was very stressful. People do that for years. I found it very stressful. I'm just a very authentic person. I am who I am. So then I decided, let me try to go back and let me see if I can be a little more moderate in my ways, you know, figure out kind of a middle way, but still kind of be part of the community. I did that for about 2 years. And, you know, I did a lot of healing work during that time. There's a lot to heal from.
yeah,
Eh,
there's.
right? You know, from JW as well, those extreme beliefs, wrong and right, black and white thinking. I mean, it's really deep psychological damage is done. So I started doing a lot of healing, and just came to a point that I was like, there's no way I can really heal while I still believe in that belief system. Like, there's just no way. I just can't. You know, and then of course, you know, certain things were bothering me a lot. My hair, that I had to cover my hair, was killing me at some point. You know, I wrote a piece about it. Um, you know, because I had grown my hair by then. You know, there were just certain practices that I couldn't do. But even more than that, it was the belief system. And it really took work that I still work on now to create a different belief system that's loving, gentle. I still consider myself spiritual, you know, which I'm still trying to figure out what that means for me. But
Yep.
meaning, but in a very positive, loving, kind, supportive way. Um, Yeah, I still consider myself Jewish, you know, um, but not in a black and white, right or wrong, more of, these are things that sometimes contribute to my life.
Yep.
What lessons could we learn from them? And at the same time, because of really what I call now trauma around some of the practices, because they were taught to me in such extreme ways, sometimes just can't participate because it's just too painful. And I just, whereas the way I grew up, it was like, you cannot miss
Yeah.
anything. And there are so many practices, like so many rules, rules upon rules upon rules. And they all have to be done perfectly. And yeah, that is a very intense part. And you're so busy. You're so busy with all, especially, women are so busy with the children and the rules of food preparation, of, on Saturday, you light the candles Friday night, and till Saturday night. I mean, the rules, I mean, you probably know the big ones: no driving, no electronics, but they go so detailed. It's very intense. But then there are positive things. Is there something beautiful about lighting candles on a Friday night and gathering together with your family for a dinner? Yeah. Do I miss some
Yep.
of that? Yeah. Because you know what? When you don't have to do it, you don't always do it. Did I kill myself for 2 days before that to cook out all the food? Oh, yes, I did. You
Yeah.
know, was I sometimes so exhausted and wished I didn't have to do it, but did it anyway because that was what was expected of me? Yes. I come to the table and I wanted to also contribute to the conversation because, I consider myself a fairly intelligent person, but was not allowed to because I'm a woman? Yes. So that's the thing. Even with the beautiful practices, there was a lot that was very harmful. And I'm grateful that, I can create a different life for myself and my children. And, you know, even those children that are not with me, the, my girls definitely have made more empowered choices for their lives within the community,
Cool.
very much within the community. My daughter who's 21 is a computer programmer. My other one has a business in art. She does some artistic work. My other one became a pharmacist. Like, these are things that I could have never dreamed of. So even though they don't talk to me, and even though they truly believe I ruined their life and all the rest of the stuff, like, I still believe that because I made these choices, that's gave them the fuel to make their own choices. Yeah.
So when you compare your life to what it is now to what it was, say, 10 years ago, how would you sum the two difference or one difference up?
2011. Wow. Huh. Feels like a lifetime away. I would say I smile a lot more. I'm a lot happier. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I'm definitely a lot happier. There's a lot of pain. Listen, anybody who's a parent who's had to go through this type of loss with their children, that's a pain that never goes away. But I have the freedom of choice. I have the freedom of choice. I have the freedom of being independent. I kind of,
Mm,
it's hard to explain to somebody who hasn't grown up in such a high control
yeah.
religion or community what it means that there's always someone looking behind you, always somebody who knows what you're doing, why you're doing it, when you're doing it. It's just so freeing to just leave my house and do like what I want, what I enjoy. I've had the opportunity to explore things that I would have never had. I used to go to a Buddhist church, not, they don't call it a church, I don't know, Buddhist temple for meditation practice, right? When I was kind of starting to meditate, I would go to, I ended up in some place. They were, it was so interesting because all of a sudden there were Hebrew letters there.
Oh, okay.
Gnostic, I'm not sure how you pronounce it. Gnostic Christian things, and he was teaching this whole belief system. I've had the opportunity to go to San Francisco and have some fun over there. I just ran a 5K race. I've just really taken the opportunity to explore and enjoy. And some of the things I might have been able to do, maybe a lot of them would have been absolutely forbidden to me.
Yeah,
Um, and now I get to choose,
you do.
and I see someone, Linda, is commenting. So I just want to
Yeah.
say, Linda, I'm seeing your comments. I'm happy to hear about your youngest daughter. It's very
Yeah,
beautiful. Yeah.
it is. So if somebody was to come across this live stream, be it from the Jewish side of things or the Ultra Orthodox or the J Dubs, and they were going down a similar line and they're wondering and they're questioning, what would you encourage them to do, whether it be a male or a female?
Yeah, I would say they're not alone. There's so many
Mm,
others, and reach out for support. There's so much support out there now. There really is. There's so much support. So I don't know if you have resources for them, or I can
yeah,
tell you some resources. Within the ultra Orthodox community, there's Footsteps in New York. There's something Hillel in Israel. There's something, forgot what it's called. I think it's called Gesher in England. In Australia, there's something called Pathways. So there are so many resources, and those are actual organizations. If you go on different social media, you'll find so many, Facebook groups and things like that. So I think that's so important, because that aloneness and thinking you're the only one going down that path can be so, so painful. And so often I'll have mostly men from the community that still look like they're part of the community. They'll tell me how they're not believers and how they live this double life. And like the first thing I'll say is, you're not alone. There's so many like you. And that aloneness is probably the most painful thing. So I would say find people, find your people. And also, like, give yourself grace, give yourself kindness. It's really hard when you're coming out of it. It's not just that you're leaving a belief system, you're leaving really a system that has psychologically damaged you so much.
yeah,
And it requires real healing, you know um, and there are healing resources out there. People are talking about, things like religious traumatic syndrome. It's a real thing, like a type of PTSD that
it
happens
is.
to
Yep,
you for so many years of being brainwashed. And then when you leave, one of the big things I know people who leave, because practice is so important in the ultra Orthodox. It's like fear of eating non-kosher, right?
yep,
Fear of desecrating Shabbos. People are scared they're going to desecrate, they're going to drive on Shabbos, and there's no question in their mind they're going to be in a car crash, right? Because that's what we're told. Something bad's going to
that's
happen,
right. Yep,
you know? And that's fine if you choose not to do those things, that's fine. But that terrifying fear is a psychological manipulation, like a fear of any obsession or any phobia. And it requires it's okay to get help. It's okay to get help, both from like how to get out of the religious brainwashing, but it really touches psychological damage, and whether it's therapy. And one of the big things are, so often we leave the community and then we reach out for help, and then we're reaching out for people in the community. I know people will end up
yeah,
going back to Orthodox therapists, and it's like, there's a big wide world out there. There are many people that understand what happened to you. They understand what happened to you, and they can help you. You don't have to reach back out to the community. For me, one of my big things was getting a job outside the community, until I realized that I was doing all my networking with people that were connected still to the community. And it took
hmm,
a lot of effort to be like, there's a big wide world out there.
yeah,
And
yeah.
gratefully I have a job in a secular nonprofit, which is amazing, and it's changing my life. But I think that really putting yourself out there, getting the help you need and deserve, that will really give you the life you want and deserve. You deserve to live your life fully.
You
You
do.
you are worth saving yourself. Like, you're worth it. You're worth it. You don't have to be. It doesn't matter how many years. I was 40 till I even considered it. 40 years is a long time, and there are people older than that. 1 year of freedom, of being able to live with your own truth, with your own choices, is worth it. You know.
Absolutely. You just mentioned something before about the men, mostly men coming to see you or talk to you.
I think
Why men?
men have more freedom in the community. It's really hard if you're a woman and you have a bunch of children. How are you? Even if you don't, where you going? What are you doing? You have your children at home. You're not going anywhere.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
I think it's they say it's evening out a little bit, especially with younger people, but it used to be that the vast majority of people leaving would be men. I think now it's evened out a little more, but a lot of it is just practically speaking. It's really hard. How do you find resources? How do you
Mm,
you're just so busy from morning to night, cooking, cleaning, taking care of the kids. You don't even have time to explore. Then, what happens to women when they're in their 50s? It's really sad because you've been really taught from a young age, your whole life is your children. If you'll have those children and you'll do what you need, you'll have your satisfaction. Then you're 50, most of your kids are out of the house, maybe all of them are out of the house, and what do you have? You have nothing. You have nothing. You're going to babysit your grandchildren, and it can get really painful at that stage.
yeah.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things I did research on was a program called One of Us.
Yes.
How accurate is that? Because I know on
Mm.
Netflix you've got Julia Hart with her TV series
Yeah.
versus the one called One of Us.
Yeah.
Um, they each touch on different things,
Right.
but how real are those programs?
Yeah, yeah. One of Us is a documentary. I actually know two of the people pretty well. I know all of them, have come across them, but two of them I've actually met. One of them I just know of. Yeah, they're actual documentaries, so they're actual stories. They're actual, yeah. And Footsteps was involved in that one as well. Yeah, that one's
Yeah.
a documentary. That one's real. She ended up losing custody. She
Oh, she
actually
did.
left. Yeah, she left the family court system because it was too much. It's crazy what they put you through, the torture. Like you've been tortured in your marriage, then you decide to leave, and then it's like you go back to the court system, and it's like starts all over again. Yeah, that's absolutely accurate. Julie Hart's thing is a reality show. So, it's like a reality show. It's like the Kardashians or the whatever other. I'm not into reality shows, so
No.
I don't like that genre. I just don't like reality shows. But yeah, she was. I thought she was pretty. She was pretty generous to the community. I think there was a lot more she could have said about what really goes on, and she didn't. I
I thought
thought
I was going to say, was that a polite way of saying something?
yeah, I don't think she wanted to go down that road of uncovering all the truths. You know, I think this was more about her promoting herself rather than, yeah, she's not involved in any advocacy work around the community. Like that's not her thing. Her thing is living her best life, which is awesome, great, live your best life. So I think the whole angle of it, she was not going to talk about stuff that goes on, the sexual abuse that goes on. She was not going to talk about the mikvah ritual and the 7 days of preparation for that and what that all looks like, which is extremely humiliating for a woman. She was not going to go there because I don't think that was what she wanted. The big splash of the show is what she did with her life and where she is. And there's a second series coming out soon. Good for her. Like she had the money to spend on, this production. It was produced by her, and she
Okay.
put
Yep.
herself out there. But again, you have to being aware she's not, as far as I know, publicly, she's not been an advocate for this kind of work, whether supporting other organizations that do this work or even supporting individuals. She has that one episode where she talks to somebody, but that's it. Like in her real life, that's not what she's decided to do, which, what? A part of the way we were raised in the community was you always have to do for others. Well, actually, you don't. It's okay to just live your life. So I think that's important to look at the way she says the story from that perspective. It's a reality show promoting herself and her children and children's businesses. Good for her. She's bright. She has bright children. They're doing good things in the world, and good for them. But One of Us is heart-wrenching and true. And there was also last year a series that came out, Unorthodox, just plain Unorthodox. That was
Yes.
like 4 part.
Yep.
That was a drama based on a memoir. A part of it was very accurate. Part of it was very inaccurate. The accurate part was at the beginning. The inaccurate part was like that in a week. She's like has this group of friends. Like that's not what happens. It
No.
takes a really long time. It,
Yeah.
it, it takes a really, and I think people were upset about. Like it takes really long. It's like my path where like for 6 months I was in and out, and then that's very common. It takes a long time after
Hmm.
years of being. You don't just like be like, oh, here I am. Like And some people never fully integrate. Like,
Yeah.
it's I, I mean, I think, Marlene Winnell's work in her book Leaving the Fold, and coining the term religious traumatic syndrome, is a big step. And I think more needs to be spoken about it, definitely in the ultra Orthodox Jewish community for people who leave, but all over, the deep psychological damage that's done, and the
Yeah.
support people need and deserve. And I think first, like, we all need to recognize it for ourselves, but then, I don't know, things need to change in that way. You don't just
Yeah.
leave. You don't just leave.
Nope. Never do.
No, you never
So
do.
if we know you do a lot of advocacy work, um, what would be the best way for somebody, if they are a ultra Orthodox or just a normal Orthodox or any of that group of community, could they get hold of you?
Yeah, well, I'm on Medium, so you could follow me on Medium, and I'm on all the social media networks: Facebook,
Okay.
Instagram, Twitter.
So just put
I
your
have a
name in.
website, I have a website, which is just my first name and last name.com, and you can sign. There's somewhere there, like, there's a pop up that comes up that you can just put your email address, and then you get onto my list, and you get my writings sometimes when I write and things like that. So yeah, I'd love to hear from you guys and connect with
Cool.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we'll make sure we put your description down, or
yeah,
those contacts into the
yeah.
description. Um, all I can say is thank you. In fact, one of our comments that's just come in now from Linda.
Yeah.
So thank you for commenting, Linda. All those other questions that you did ask earlier on, they were touched on earlier in the live stream. We know you came on a little bit later, but we're grateful for all those ones who've come on to be able to join us.
Yeah,
So
thank you
thank
for
you.
having me. I will say a big part of my journey has been connecting with people from other communities, especially at the beginning. It was so hard for me to be with people who experienced such similar traumas, that when I would connect with people that came, from Jehovah's Witness and other extreme, really fundamentalist Christian groups, it was a little easier for me, that process. So I'm very grateful. Thank you. Thank you for having me on, and thank you for
No,
this
it's been great.
conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause you've mentioned some of the resources. Another one that we're becoming part of here in New Zealand is recovering from free religion.
Yeah.
And we had last week we had Daryl Ray on. He's a wonderful guy and
Mm.
a lot of resources there. We've got others who from within the XJW community have produced books, provide services, and it is there, like you say, reach out for those resources because they're there to help.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for being so authentic, telling us your story, and we hope that your court case goes well.
Thank you.
And then once that's over, you can speak about that without getting into trouble. And keep up your good work.
Yeah. Thank
You're
you.
doing wonderfully, and the people around you will certainly be appreciating all the efforts that you're doing to be at their side and support them.
Thank you.
So thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Well, that brings an end to our live stream for today. And for those in the audience, thanks for being here. For those who are going to watch it a little bit later, we hope you enjoy it. If you do have any questions, please put them in the description. I mean, not the description, the comments, and we'll make sure that Beatrice will be able to get some answers back to you. And yeah, in the meantime, wherever you are, whether you're starting the new week or whether your weekend's coming to an end, thank you for being here. Look after yourselves, keep safe, and we hope to see you again and at one of our next live streams. Until then, bye for now. Try and keep your smile on, and remember, you're not alone. So until next time, catch you till then. Bye for now.